What have the Blue Jackets done so far this season? What will the Blue Jackets do the rest of the season? We talk about all those things with CBJ radio host Dylan Tyrer today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Hayden Heilshorn. With me in a second is my co-host, Jay Foster. We are also joined by Dylan Tyrer from the Columbus Blue Jackets Radio Network, and we're all here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get going, thank you so much for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, right here on YouTube and the SiriusXM app. This episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So we decided, Jay and I are just fans of this thing. We think that we're smart. We think we know what we're talking about. But when we are joined by a guy like Dylan Tyrer, we realize we know so little about the Columbus Blue Jackets. And Dylan really did a fantastic job covering the team with us here today. So without further ado, let's give it to a conversation where Jay and I had Dylan on the show. This was before the Montreal Canadiens game earlier this week, so bear in mind that this could be a little dated depending on how the Blue Jackets played that Thursday night against the Habs, but it's a really good conversation, and we'll just kick it over to Jay now.
This episode of Locked On Blue Jackets, we have got a special guest. We've got Dylan Tyrer here, and we're going to see how he feels like the season is going. We've got some prospect questions to mix in because Dylan is the prospect guy on the Blue Jackets beat. So I guess let's take it away with kind of a bit of a general question, Dylan. Brand new head coach for the Blue Jackets, came in, 3 days before training camp started. How do you feel that Pascal Vincent's done with kind of, because it's the first month of the regular season, but it also is kind of his first full month as the Blue Jackets head coach. Yeah. He didn't have the summer to prepare. He just kind of got thrown straight in. So, how do you feel he's done with his first kind of month on the job?
Well, first off, thanks to both of you guys for having me on. Excited to chat some Blue Jackets with you. But I would give Pascal Vincent probably a 10 out of 10 to start things off. Pascal Vincent, has a real command of the situation, I think. And you talked about it right there, just being thrown into it that quickly and, right before training camp started can be difficult, but he was ready for it. I think around Nationwide Arena, if you're there every day, it's almost kind of forgotten at this point. Frankly, a week into it, I feel like it was forgotten. Pascal Vincent just feels like the right guy to me. And he has this team playing what I think is probably the best hockey we've seen in 2 or 3 years, right? The Blue Jackets have had their struggles the last few seasons. Season number 1 under Brad Larson, I think the Blue Jackets exceeded expectations, but the way they've played these last 3 games, and don't get me wrong, it's a very small sample size, but have we seen 3 games this well played in a row by the Blue Jackets in 3 years? I can't, since the Blue Jackets were in the playoffs, I don't know if we've seen so many games strung together where they've looked as good as they have these last 3, talking about Calgary, Minnesota, and then Anaheim. I know they end up losing that game to the Anaheim Ducks, but the Blue Jackets were the better team on the ice from start to finish, I thought. In that game, they had 7 opportunities on the power play and just couldn't score on the power play. And frankly, in that game, it wasn't for a lack of generating. I know that has been a struggle for the Blue Jackets really throughout the organization's history, is scoring power play goals. But they generated in that game. I think they just had some bad luck, but they were really happy with the way that they worked after. And I think that word work there is the key, that there's just an expectation that you show up ready to work now under Pascal Vincent. It's not, wavering from one game to another. Oh, the effort lacked this game. The effort was here this game. They kind of had the effort for 2 periods this game, didn't really have it for the other 20 minutes. The last 3 games that we've seen, it's just been a different level. We've seen intensity for 60 minutes from the Blue Jackets, and I think Pascal Vincent has everything to do with that. Practices, I think, are fresh. They're organized. They're energetic. The games, I feel like the Blue Jackets are just piling games together. We'll see what happens these next few. This is when the NHL season really kicks in. You're playing, every other day. You're going on the road now compared to the Blue Jackets starting with a lot of games at home. It's the real test. This is when the season really picks up, but so far, so good for me. I love what Pascal Vincent has done. He's such a thoughtful guy, just a really intelligent head coach, and I think the Blue Jackets have responded to his style very well.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like before we move on from Pascal Vincent, I think something that's really kind of stood out to me as someone who kind of has a little bit more distance from the team is like his answers in press conferences.
Yeah.
Like his answer on why David Jiricek didn't play a lot against Anaheim. I was like, this is kind of the head coach that I feel like we've been waiting for a long time. And like I was in the arena for the game against Anaheim for the first time, like for the first time since literally 2019 was my first like Jackets game in person. And the pregame video with the speech from Pascal Vincent, I was like, this is phenomenal. So like obviously there's a big difference between like doing the right thing and saying the right thing. But right now, Pascal Vincent, for me anyway, is saying all of the right things and he's checking kind of all of the boxes, I think.
Yeah, he's saying the right things, and then the team is backing that up on the ice, right? Like he said, he was asked in his opening press conference when he took over that those few days before training camp that you referenced earlier. And somebody asked him, why should Blue Jackets fans believe you, essentially? Like, why should Blue Jackets fans still have faith that, we've seen this team the last couple of years. There's this, quote unquote process that they're going through where they're going to be better when it's all said and done. And we didn't really see it for the last couple of years. So how can we trust you? How can we believe you? And he said, I can't tell you how or why it's going to work. You're just going to have to wait and see. You're going to have to watch on the ice. And again, it's early in the season. It's a small sample size, but it looks like the players have bought in, and it looks like he has them playing the way that he wants to, the way that they want to. And, frankly, if I'm a Blue Jackets fan right now, I'm proud of the way the Blue Jackets are playing. I'm enjoying the way the Blue Jackets are playing. They have 5 points out of a possible 6 in their last 3 games. They've been pretty dominant in each of those 3 games. I don't know what more you could ask for, to be completely honest, outside of a 3-game winning streak going into this one against Montreal.
Dylan, one of the positions the last couple of years that, for better or worse, has taken a lot of heat from Blue Jackets fans is obviously the goaltender position. And it's not just Elvis taking heat. I mean, Corpy took heat last year. Tarasov has taken heat at some time. But we haven't even seen Tarasov play this year. So the Blue Jackets have just been rolling with Spencer Martin and Elvis. How do you think the goaltender position has played to this point in the season?
I think Blue Jackets goaltending has been pretty much as good as you'd want it to be, right? It's good enough to win hockey games. Elvis, going back to his last preseason game in Washington, I didn't think he looked very good in the preseason until that game, and that was the dress rehearsal, right? They took on a full Washington Capitals team. It was best on best that game, getting ready for an NHL game. It was an NHL game, essentially, even though it was the preseason. The Blue Jackets ended up winning that game. It was a really, really gutsy effort. It wasn't necessarily the style of hockey that we've seen these last 3 games where they've been dominant, but they hung around in that game. You could see signs, and I think Elvis was a big part of that. I think ever since, he's been very, very solid. He has his little, not an injury bug, but a sickness, right? He has his illness that forces him out of the one game, and then he has to miss another game. But outside of that, I think Elvis has been pretty solid. He's made some really big saves. I didn't think he was necessarily like out of this world excellent in their last game against Anaheim, but he was good enough to win the game, right? Like I think he made 24 saves in that game, but he was certainly good enough to win the game. He made some huge saves when the Blue Jackets needed him to. I mean, you look at the goals that were scored in that one by Anaheim. The first goal is a rebound, a 2-on-1 where Pavel Mintyukov, shoots it in and out of Elvis's glove. It was a wonder that Elvis even got the glove on that in the first place. The rebound falls out right on the doorstep, and Strome's able to score. Then the game-tying goal hurts, but Zach Werenski talked about it after. He said it ramped off of his stick and went in. So what are you going to do there if you're Elvis? And then in overtime, he made a huge save to start overtime. And then, how many breakaways or 2-on-1s did Anaheim have in that overtime where Elvis was able to come up big? And then finally they have a breakaway and Frank Vetrano scores the game-winning goal. So you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't necessarily think Elvis has been like, oh my God, this guy is winning us games or saving us games, but he's been good enough to win. That's all you can ask for. And as far as it goes with Spencer Martin, I think he's been pretty much as good as he could have been. He's a guy that we didn't know very much about whatsoever. He's kind of getting a fresh start here in the NHL with the Blue Jackets. I haven't talked a whole lot with Spencer yet. Curious to, hear what he thinks about this opportunity. But for a goalie that hasn't had a ton of NHL time, he's spent a lot of time, in that Vancouver organization playing in the AHL. You'd think that he wants to really grab this opportunity by the horns and prove himself. And he wants to prove that he's an NHL goalie. And I think in a limited action that we've seen from Spencer Martin, he looks like that.
Yeah, I thought he was exceptional in the game against Calgary, I think it was. I thought he was just excellent. So we've talked a lot kind of in general, on Twitter, on this podcast, about all of the new guys that have come into the organization this summer. But I feel like no one really kind of took into account Zach Werenski's return. He played 13 games last season. I think he got hurt the beginning of November, middle of November. And that was it. He was done. How much of a difference does having Zach Werenski make for this team?
Well, I think going back to the preseason, every single preseason game that Zach Werenski played in, I thought to myself at some point of the game, wow, this team is so much better with Zach Werenski. He's the number one defenseman on the team, right? You take that guy out and it's going to mean things are difficult. But I think you can probably look at the success of some of the other defensemen on the Blue Jackets this year. And I think having Zach Werenski back has something to do with that. Like Erik Goodbranson. Has anybody complained about Erik Goodbranson early on this season after people complained about him a lot last year? Well, he's playing in a role that he probably should be playing in right now.
He's
right?
not playing 27 minutes a night.
He's playing third pair minutes. And frankly, what's been a really solid third pair between he and Jake Bean. Pascal Vincent talked about Jake Bean, another guy that missed almost all of last season. Early on, Pascal said that Jake Bean might be the Blue Jackets' best defenseman this year. I still think Zach Werenski is working his way back into things, getting comfortable. But, going back to Goodbranson, he's slotted in a spot he should be. Now the Blue Jackets have Ivan Provorov, where I thought Provorov was unbelievable in that game against Anaheim. He was ridiculously good. Ever since Damon Severson was benched in the third period a couple games ago, he has been really good. I think for expected goals right now, that pair of Severson-Werenski expected goals is fourth in the NHL or top 5 in the NHL. Then the Jiricek-Provorov pair is top 20, which is really good. But you see what I mean? Like Provorov had to be the number one guy in Philadelphia. Now he doesn't have to be the number one guy with the Blue Jackets. He's playing in maybe a role that suits him a little bit better. And same thing with Erik Goodbranson, and that's because Zach Werenski's back. With no Zach Werenski, those guys are going to be asked to do more, and you're just not as deep. Now, what Zach Werenski does, everybody knows him, I think, is an offensive defenseman in the NHL, but you just look at some of the plays he makes, and he looks like such a low-effort player. When you're watching him play hockey, you're like, wow, this guy is barely moving. But he covers ground like crazy. It's insane. Like, he'll be in one spot and then just slides over to another with no effort whatsoever, and he makes a small little play with his stick, or he takes the body, and it makes the biggest difference in the world. It's just little plays that Zach Werenski makes that really help out the Blue Jackets. His ability to close a gap, his ability to use his size. And I think everybody's just slotted in a little bit better this season because Zach Werenski's back. Again, nobody's being asked to play out of their role or out of themselves. And I think that's a really good thing. And I like him playing with Severson. Like Severson the other night against Anaheim, I think he made a really underrated play at the blue line. I talked about Provorov and how good he was in that game earlier, but Severson made a play at the blue line where it looked like the Ducks were going to come in 3-on-1, I think, at that point. And instead of waiting back, which I feel like the Blue Jackets might have done last year, there's one defenseman back, he waits back in the zone. He took a risk. He pinched up right at the blue line, and he took the body. He put the body on the guy with the puck, and he gummed up the entire play, and Anaheim went offside, and that just kills a 3-on-1 opportunity right there. So you see what I mean? It's just little plays like that I think I think it has to do with coaching. I think it has to do with Zach Werenski being back, just a different level of confidence this year for Blue Jackets defensemen. Again, I'm going to preface everything by saying it's early, but these are the early returns.
Passion, drive, patience. This is what brings home the winning trophy, in this case, the Stanley Cup. It also is what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to a peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Absolutely. We're talking to Dylan Tyrer, who is the pre-intermission and post-game show host on the Blue Jackets Radio Network. Thank you so much for coming on, Dylan. We really appreciate it, man. Can you speak a little bit here on the impact of a couple of these rookies? And I'm talking about Adam Fantilli and David Jiricek, because both of them assuming big roles in their first real year in the NHL.
Yeah.
And they both are playing pretty solid. But what have you seen from these two dudes?
Yeah, let's start off talking about Jiricek, because I think we'll just naturally spend more time talking about Adam Fantilli. But Jiricek is a player that I really, really like. I loved David Jiricek when the Blue Jackets drafted him in Montreal, actually. Tonight's going to be his first game back at the Bell Center after being drafted in Montreal in 2022. But I liked the player then. You watch the highlights. I talked to different people about David Jiricek. When I watched the highlights, I was like, holy crap, this guy, he's a stout defender. He's big. He can use the body, but he can chip in offensively. We saw him score his first NHL goal against the Rangers a couple of games ago. I feel like he's just getting more comfortable in the NHL, right? He played a full pro season last year in North America with Cleveland, where he put together one of the best seasons by a teenage defenseman in AHL history, which is really, really impressive and hard to do as any teenager, let alone a guy that's coming over to a new country and living within a new culture for the first time. He's from Czechia. But this year, I just see him getting more and more comfortable in the NHL. It's a hard thing for a young defenseman to do, is adjust to the NHL style, the speed of the game, the strength of the players, the skill of the players, the structure, where to be all the time. But David Jiricek is quietly, I think, doing a good job. He's, of course, going to have his ups and downs, his hiccups throughout the season. But I think if you were to ask Pascal Vincent overall how he's thought that David Jiricek has played this year, he'd say good. And look at it right now. The Blue Jackets have 8 defensemen. If David Jiricek weren't playing well enough, he'd be out of the lineup, and either Adam Boquist or Andrew Peeke would be in. So I think that tells you everything that you need to know, that they view David Jiricek as a guy who is one of the top 6 defensemen in this organization. And if he's a top 6 defenseman in this organization right now, he's only going to get better and better. He has the potential to be a real star on the blue line in this league. As far as it goes with Adam Fantilli, I think we're literally watching him become a star in front of our eyes. Like, he's top 20, I think, in expected goals right now among forwards in the NHL, which is, that's unreal. You think of 20 players in the NHL, 20 of the best players, and Adam Fantilli is one of them right now. I'm not going to go out and say, oh, yeah, Adam Fantilli is one of the best 20 players in the league. But if you look at certain analytics, maybe he is. But what Adam Fantilli is doing is really getting better, I think, every time we see him play. The Blue Jackets have played 6 games this year to this point. I think he could have scored in every single game. He finally broke through against Minnesota, scoring a big goal to give the Blue Jackets the lead in the third period. He does it again against Anaheim, scoring a big goal to give the Blue Jackets the lead in the third period. He's a special player, right? He does everything well. When I've talked about Adam Fantilli before, I think I kind of compare him to a 5-tool player in baseball, because I think people understand what that is, right? A guy that has speed, power, can play defense, yada, yada, yada. Adam Fantilli is a terrific 2-way player. He seems like he's always in the right spot, back checks very hard. He's fast for his size. He has just unbelievable skating ability, flies through the neutral zone. He's got a great shot. He can make plays. He can play physical. He's got a mean streak to his game. He's a bona fide center in the NHL, right there. I don't think there's anything that you dislike about Adam Fantilli's game. The knock on him coming into the NHL was maybe sometimes he would try to do too much, on his own, you're the best player on your team in certain situations, and that's what you're going to do, right? So it's just a matter of time before he completely feels comfortable and fits in the NHL. I think that's going to be much sooner than even I expected this year, because it looks like he's getting better and better every single game. He's already one of the Blue Jackets' best players. But as far as the Blue Jackets want to play this year, I think he's the perfect player for it. And they have a lot of players that are perfect for it. And I think that's maybe part of the reason that you see Kent Johnson healthy scratched a couple of times this year too. Nobody's a bigger Kent Johnson fan than I am. I love Kent Johnson. I think he's going to be a great player for the Blue Jackets, but does he necessarily fit what the team is doing right now? I don't think so. He needs to figure out how to play within this system. The Blue Jackets are a big team right now. They're a fast team. They play north-south, and they do it with skill. You think about Adam Fantilli. He plays exactly like that. You think about Alexander Texier. He plays exactly like that. Jack Roslovic right now is playing exactly like that. Kirill Marchenko, when he's on, he's playing exactly like that. Boone Jenner is playing exactly like that. So I think the Blue Jackets need to find a way, and Kent Johnson needs to find a way. This is kind of going on a tangent here, but Kent Johnson needs to find a way to fit into that. But as far as it goes with Fantilli, he's a driver. He's a driver for the Blue Jackets, and that's what you want, right? When you draft a guy 3rd overall who probably should be the 1st overall pick in any other year that there's not a Connor Bedard, that's what you're looking for. And the Blue Jackets, I'm saying this very, very prematurely, but the Blue Jackets might be looking at the best player in franchise history. I don't think that's out of the question. This guy, I think he has a lot of confidence. He has that it factor on and off the ice. We've already seen him score 2 huge goals this season in big moments, which I think proves that. He has all of the makings to be a very, very special player in this league.
Get back to talking with Dylan in just a second. But first, I want to tell you guys about GameTime, because you shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. GameTime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals. I went to the Blue Jackets game just on Tuesday night. I used GameTime, got the best price I could have asked for. I saw that price continue to go down all the way up until game time. Use the GameTime app. All-in prices, views from your seat, and their best guaranteed price. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy. All-in prices show you right up front what you're going to pay, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Again, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
I don't know that the Blue Jackets have ever had a player like Adam Fantilli. You can talk about the impact that Rick Nash had on this franchise, the impact that Sergei Bobrovsky had on this franchise, but I don't know that they've had a player like Adam Fantilli, maybe ever.
Yeah, Rick Nash, great player for the Blue Jackets, is Mr. Blue Jacket, essentially. I think he would probably tell you that Adam Fantilli has all the makings to be better than him. Artemi Panarin is probably the most skilled player the organization's ever had. I don't know. I loved when Panarin was here. The team was different on the ice with Panarin. But in terms of what Adam Fantilli could be, I think, Panarin's a really special player, but I think the hopes are that Adam Fantilli is better than that, right? Plus, he's a center.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about another new guy. So for people listening to this, we recorded this just before the Montreal game on Thursday. Dmitry Voronkov making his NHL debut tonight. How do you think he's looked in practice in Cleveland? How do you feel about Voronkov making his NHL debut tonight?
It's really exciting. Before this game, Bob McElligott talked with Pascal Vincent. And Pascal Vincent, he said I've heard some just super hyperbolic things said about Dmitry Voronkov, which is crazy. But I talked with Trent Vogelhuber, who is his head coach in Cleveland to start the year. He was also his head coach in Traverse City in the Prospects tournament. And at that point, Trent Vogelhuber said that this is a guy that you want on your team in a 7-game playoff series, which when you hear that for a guy that's brand new, you're like, whoa, this guy must be special. And then Pascal Vincent talked about him today with Bob McElligott, and he said that he thinks Dmitry Voronkov has the ability to be the best net front player in the NHL. That's what he said today, is the ability to be the best net front player in the NHL, best net front player in the NHL on the power play. So while we're going to see Voronkov start on the fourth line, he is going to play on the power play. And that's because he's so huge. And that's the number one thing you notice about Dmitry Voronkov. He is 6'5", 240 pounds, and he is every bit of 6'5" and every bit of 240 pounds. And he uses that size. Like, he's a mean player. Like, I think he eats sticks and pucks for breakfast, literally. Like, this guy like blocked a shot off of his face in the KHL a couple of years ago and came back. And I mean, he's a guy that they don't play a full 82 game slate in the KHL, but he's a guy that, if they did, would score 18 to 25 goals a year there using his size in front of the net. He's not afraid to fight, not afraid to throw it around. I mean, the Blue Jackets' fourth line right now is massive. Sean Corrali is like 6'2", 210 probably. Matthew Olivier is a big guy who obviously chucks him. And then you've got Voronkov, who's like twice the size of both of them combined. So I'm excited. We have to see, right? Like, nobody really knows what it's going to be like. We saw him in the preseason. He didn't necessarily do a whole lot there. I think they wanted to see a little bit better conditioning from him. Like, he came to North America not fully understanding just how fast the NHL is. But they tested him yesterday, I think. It might have been before that, actually. But they gave him, physical testing to see where he was at conditioning-wise, and he's at the NHL conditioning level that they want to see. So if he's there ready to play, I mean, I just said it. Pascal Vincent thinks he could be the best net front player in the National Hockey League. That sounds pretty good to me for a guy that was a former fourth-round draft pick. So it's wait and see for Dmitry Voronkov. I have absolutely no idea what to expect from the guy, just because when's the last time we saw a Blue Jacket with a skill set like this? When's the last time we saw a Blue Jacket that is 6'5", 240 pounds and plays in front of the net? It's a very unique thing in the league. So if he's able to have some success and build off of it, I don't see him going back to Cleveland.
All right, that was an absolute treat to have Dylan on today. That was just the first half of our conversation. We're going to talk to him again next week. You'll see the second half of that conversation as we get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty, as we talk about prospects, a lot of prospect talk. He is the smartest guy I know when it comes to talking about Columbus Blue Jackets prospects. So make sure you check out that one. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. My name is Hayden Housewarn. You can find me on Twitter at HaydenH971. You can find my buddy Jay on Twitter at _JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. You can also email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, and until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.